Well, Britain makes an historic announcement today after a dramatic attack on their soil. They've expelled 23 Russian diplomats, the most since the Cold War. This after the Russians allegedly carried out a nerve agent attack against a former Russian spy who had defected. The attack landed Sergei Skripal, his daughter, and dozens of others in the area of Salisbury, England, in the hospital. Skripal and his daughter are clinging to life at this hour. Prime Minister Theresa May spoke passionately to lawmakers today about that decision.
They have treated the use of a military-grade nerve agent in Europe with sarcasm, contempt and defiance. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no alternative conclusion other than that the Russian state was culpable for the attempted murder of Mr. Skripal and his daughter.
Joining us to talk about the response to this crisis here is Harriet Cross, the British Consul General in New England. And thank you so much for coming in, being with us tonight. Thank you. We appreciate it. So explain here the decision and the manner in which the Prime Minister responded. I think we have a full frame here to show people the decisions that she made. One is to expel all of these diplomats. You're suspending all high-level contacts with the Russian Federation. No British ministers or royals will attend the World Cup in Russia this summer. Explain the thinking behind this response.
Okay, so I think we start yesterday, which is when we said to Russia, can you explain yourself? So either you sanctioned an attempted assassination on British soil of a Russian dissident, or you have lost control of a nerve agent that we know belongs to you. Can you explain that? Today, they were not able to explain it. They decided not to respond to that request, and therefore Theresa May has set out a series of measures to respond to that Russian aggression. It was aggression on British soil, which is really serious.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, today publicly condemned Russia for the attack, said, we agree with our ally, the UK, that Russia did it. The President Trump, has not yet done that. He has not condemned Russia. What do you make of that? Does British leadership want to see that from the President?
Theresa May spoke to President Trump within the last 24 hours and came away from that conversation fully reassured that the United States was fully alongside us in this matter. So we don't have any concerns about what President Trump has or has not said. Really pleased to hear Nikki Haley come out so clearly this afternoon at the Security Council to say that. So, you know, we've had a one-on-one conversation and Theresa May is very much reassured of the President's position.
So talk a little bit about where the investigation stands, because one thing that Nikki Haley did say today, which was terrifying, is the use of this nerve agent goes to show if there is no response to this, this isn't the last place. Salisbury won't be the last place that you might see a chemical weapon attack, right? It could be New York. It could be anywhere next. So where does the investigation stand at this point into what you think the source of this chemical was?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is, as you yourself have just suggested, it's an escalation of attacks over a period of time. So back in 2006, there was a chemical attack on a Russian, Litvinenko, in the UK. This time, it's much more serious because other people have been affected. So in terms of there's a certain amount of security around the actual investigation, so I won't go into detail, but it's clear that the nerve agent is a military-grade nerve agent that was developed and possessed by the USSR and then inherited, if you like, by the Russian Federation. That we are sure of.
How do they get something like that into the UK?
That's not, at least I'm not able to tell you about that. I'm sure
that's part of the investigation. Your country was so divided over the Brexit debate. In America, we have our own political divisions going on right now. Are you worried about some sort of a split between the American response to the situation and the British response from the President versus what Theresa May is saying?
It doesn't feel that way to me. In fact, I'm really reassured at the moment that the international response has been so positive. So the NATO Secretary General came out really clearly. President Macron and Chancellor Merkel made a joint statement of support. It feels like Russia's the one that's quite isolated at the moment, and the Security Council debate this afternoon really reflected that. So we don't have any concerns.
It is interesting when you hear other experts talk about what's been going on in Britain. It seems as though, I think the expression that I heard earlier was, there's a post-Soviet mafia state of these people with a lot of money moving in and out of European countries who might have access to something like a nerve agent. Is there any focus on trying to get in the way of some of these people as they across borders, all across Europe and the West.
Yes, and I think the first thing to say is we've got a really great community of Russians in the UK who are a great benefit to the British society. I think that's really important to make clear. But there are some people who are actively committing crimes, and these are international crimes of really serious levels. So Theresa May has spoken about reinforcing our border security, looking at private flights that come into the UK, private jets, and giving those more of a search. There's also a question of Russian assets. So if there are state assets in the UK that look like they might be used to commit crimes, they will be seized and frozen.
We will see where it goes. 23 Russian diplomats expelled today from the UK. Harriet Cross, the British Consul General for New England. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks.